Hi there, and welcome back to Mystery Bel Canto. My name is Joseph Cianciulli. I am your host. I am also the founder of the Academy of Bel Canto. I am joined today by the fantastic, wonderful opera singer, operatic tenor, Thomas Dehorney. Thomas is a professional opera singer. He's also a professional teacher of opera and opera technique. He also studied with Dan Montes and is a part of the Bel Canto lineage of Garcia, Razem Evans. And he's also the co-founder of a new and upcoming opera company, Opera on 75 in McKinney, Texas. More on that at the very end of the episode, after we kind of get some more information about what Tommy's doing now and about his history and his background. So, without further ado, welcome, Tommy. How's it going, man?
Going well. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So, tell us about your journey. Tell us about what it's like. You know, how you kind of fell into this career path, where you are now, and how you met Dan along the way. How that happened.
Sure. Well, I came into contact with opera at about 16 years old, by mistake, actually. I'm from Texas, so I'm a football guy, played football all through school. And, but I was in choir for fun, that's where all my buddies were. And so one day I was asked to audition for a Disney in Review kind of Broadway show our choir was doing. I would reluctantly said okay. At that time, I thought I was going to be in the Boys to Men group with my buddies, not opera. So he heard me sing and let me sing a show from Seven Brides and Seven Brothers. I was the lead, Adam Ponape. And at that point, people started to say, this kid has a voice for the stage, maybe opera or Broadway or something like this. And my father took it upon himself to make me sit down and watch the Three Tenors, which I had never heard of. And at that time, I was drawn to Luciano Pavarotti, and I was just amazed, mesmerized by his sound and the way he made people feel, how easy it looked. And that was how I got the bug. And from there, I went and studied at the University of North Texas under a lot of teachers there, and some wonderful singers were there when I was there. Latanya Moore, for instance, she's a pretty big star in the opera world right now. We're still pretty good friends. And then I moved to Philadelphia. After having worked in Italy a little bit before I moved, I was told by a conductor named Maestro Gregory Buchhalter from New York, who works at the Metropolitan Opera, that I needed to go to the East Coast. And so I moved to Philadelphia. And that is where really my career began, as far as truly began. And that is where I met Mr. Daniel Montes. And Dan was just an incredible singer, a really good friend of mine also. And, it's funny because I came to a crossroads in my early singing days when I started Philadelphia. I started to get a little work in New York and other places, but my technique was not really finished. I was kind of singing in a unorthodox way. And Dan pulled me to the side and said, you have great potential. I think I can help you sing better. And obviously, I was very reluctant because I had contracts I had to fulfill and food to put on the table with those contracts. And so I finished my contracts, got through with those performances, and took a year off. And I worked solely with Dan for a year without doing other performances. And he really changed my life, changed my vocal approach. And that's how I really met Dan and really got started in this wonderful world of bel canto.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, Yeah, I remember just like you talking to Dan and asking him, he was I had sung for the Metropolitan Opera competition, and I come out of university singing like a mezzanine and all these big high arias, and he used to sit in the cafe and be like, "Oh, that's a pretty voice." I was like, "Man, it's not just a little pretty voice, it's a big voice." And he's like, "No, it's a little voice, you're singing in mix." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, nobody's ever told me I'm singing in mix." Whatever, I just brushed him off, and then I sang for the Metropolitan Opera competition and at 19, and the one of the women pulled me aside and was like, "You've got a nice voice, but you're not gonna get hired to sing on an operatic stage without having, some body behind the sound. You need, what's called appoggio, and if you can find somebody who knows what that word means, you better stick with them." And I remember going back to Dan at the restaurant, he was like, "So, how'd it go?" I was like, they told me I was singing in a mix, so I don't know if you can help me with that." And he's like, "Ah, yes." So he said same thing to me. He was like, "So, if you wanna study this way, you have to commit to dropping all of your engagements." And I already had at 19 I had a cover at Opera Delaware. I had a cover at Philly Opera. I was like, I just won a classical singer competition. I was like, I'm gonna stop everything. He's like, "Yeah, even your church shops." And I was like, "Man, what am I supposed to do for work?" And he was like, "You have to go back to playing and dancing, but if you really want to learn this, you're gonna have to come off the voice completely." And I mean, I had just finished school, so they were asking me, to go on to master studies, and I was like, "No, I think I'm gonna try this guy out." And 10 years later,
Yeah.
I think you agree. Like the thing with Dan was like you could ask him any question about the voice, and it just made sense.
Mhm.
The whatever the answer was made sense. He could replicate it with his
Yeah,
voice, and then he would give you
absolutely.
exercises, and you felt it. But
Mhm.
what do you think were some of the challenges in, after having the voice built, um, maintaining the voice? Did you notice any changes when you try to go back to some of the older
Oh, yeah.
habits that you had?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, Dan working with Dan for me was almost like looking in the future of what my voice could become because we had similar voices as far as the size of our
Yeah.
voice and the repertoire that we would sing, even though he always said, I'm a leggero,
Yeah.
we knew better than that, right? So
Yes.
the guy's
Yes.
voice was a volcano. So, but he, when he would fit something in the beginning, and realized that you have that aha moment,
Mhm.
I would run with it and I would get myself in trouble. I'd have that first sign of, oh my God, I can't believe I
Mhm.
can do this. I've never been able to do this. And you run home and you do it, you do it, you do it, you do it. And then you come back to him and it's like, it doesn't work anymore because you overdid it. He's like, no, no, I told you, only do it when I'm here.
Yeah.
So that getting used to these new sensations and these new approaches for someone, I was already 30 years old when I started with Dan. So I had a lot of built up bad memory of, vocal memory of singing a certain way. And so it was a real um, uh, kind of a fight to let go of that muscle memory that was there from the past. But Dan was just very diligent and just a complete master. Every voice lesson was like magic.
Mhm.
It's hard to explain, certainly hard to, um, unless you are like yourself, really, into the logic of everything and sit with him and really understand all the meanings behind it, which I
Mhm.
do a lot of it. But he truly has a gift of
Mhm.
teaching and understanding and hearing the voice in a way I've never experienced before or since.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like I told you off camera, like it was crazy how, there were things that he would, I think in the industry, at least in the teaching, like the college and university teaching industry of voice, there's a lot of like little secrets and like quick fixes that people work with. They're like, just try this and it'll just fix things. or just tweak this or try this little trick that I learned. And with Dan, it was always because there were things in the beginning that I always thought he was just, trying to give me a quick way of feeling appoggio or managing appoggio to passaggio, or feeling squillo. And he was like, no, these exercises, and going from the college system that was like, just try this exercise, try this one. Um, to
Yeah.
Dan, where he was like, "Okay, so I'm hearing this in the voice. Let's change the vowel, change the consonant." And then, he would only take you up to certain points in your range, certain times. You're like, "I can go higher, or I can go lower," and he's like, "No, that's we needed to, we need to release something." Or I think what killed me was like how good his ear was, which I think is a lost art in teaching. That like that man,
Yes.
you would come in and, like, we were like we were younger, and, we'd start singing, he'd
Yeah.
be like, "So, how much did you drink last night?" Like, "Man, I didn't drink anything last night."
I was just
And
going to
he
say that.
yeah, "Okay." And he'd go back on the piano, and he'd warm me up a little more, and he'd be like, "Okay, but seriously, how much did you drink?" And, like, 30 minutes into the lesson, you're like, "Okay, man, I had 1 drink. I knew it. I knew it." He's like, "Did you sleep well last night?" He's like, "I heard it in the resonance." So I think that was, it
Yep.
was you couldn't get anything by him. I think there was one student that we both
Nothing.
know that was smoking, and he
Yeah.
was like, yeah, he was like, no, I knew from the beginning. I asked her every lesson, she always said no. But yeah, I mean, and that came from his work with Barbara. I remember him saying he could never get the recordings, which was unfortunate. But Barbara had created this recording set that he trained off of with the Houston Grand SLP that she trained under in her master's dissertation. So it was the exercises, not the linguist, but the Wilcox exercises being sung
Hmm.
by these people who had all these voice disorders. So he had like weed resonance versus cigarette resonance, growing up in a chemical environment.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So he was like, this is how I learned to hear all of this. And he was like, SLPs use a lot of technology, but the lost art is being able to use your ear, because once you use your ear, you can hear what the voice needs. Then you can use certain vowel and consonant combinations to bring more connection or to more release in the voice. So, oh yeah, I worked for like a good 3 years trying to find those recordings, and he was like, "Oh, somebody stole them." Barbara said somebody stole them from her, but yeah, he had a great year. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it
what
did.
what did you think? Going back to auditioning, did you think it was easier, harder? Did you find more challenges as far as maintaining the voice, or at least like keeping the voice in a certain state? Did you notice when you did certain things before that you could compensate before that you couldn't do after working with Dan? Um,
Yes.
like,
Yes. Yes, there was so my issue when I went to Dan, my main issue was I was not singing on the breath. I really didn't have a true concept of singing on the breath, uh, as well as I had what was told to me somewhat of a kind of a tongue clutch issue. I depressed the back of my tongue, in my mouth when I went up to my high notes, and I created a false sensation on the high notes, just a completely, totally different voice. And it was a powerful sound, but it was completely different from the rest of my voice.
mhm,
So when I tell you, no one could fix that all through college, any other private teacher I had, all the way up till 30 years old until I met Dan. He's the only person that was able to get me out of that. And so when I tried to go back to sing that way after working with Dan, even after just a couple of weeks, I couldn't do that sound anymore. I tried, you know,
mhm,
it was gone. That my whole vocal tract was just completely different. It functioned differently. So yes, and so when I got into auditions after working with Dan, the comments, I remember working with a particular coach at the Academy of Vocal Arts. um, I went and had a run through of my audition arias with her, and she was somebody that works with all of their people. And I sang La mia Letizia infondere for her by Verdi. And the first thing she said was, "Oh my, the voice is really even from bottom to top, from top to bottom. I don't hear any breaks. I don't hear any, it's an even sound from the bottom to the top." And that said everything to me, because once I had that mastered, then I can work on the dynamics. I can be more musical, get into character and all of that. And I didn't have that freedom until I met with Dan. So the auditions, they were much easier. I had agent consideration right before I left um, to come back here to Dallas when I was living in Philadelphia. And here's a telling story about what Dan's technique can do for you and the tools he gives you, right? I remember two things. Him and I were working on a new opera that I was hired to do called Iago. It's based on Othello, but it's based on the him after he dies. He's a ghost, and the point of view is from Iago while he's in prison. He's having these visions. So I played a ghost of Othello, and I also played Iago's prison warden, who was a drunk and a wife beater, right? And he was hunchback on top of that. So two roles in the same opera, completely different roles. Majestic Othello and Othello, and then this hunchback Quasimodo Rigoletto looking role. You know, and the music of Othello was the normal music from Verdi. And so, but the other music was completely different and new and modern and a lot
Mhm.
of rhythms and very tricky to learn. So Dan and I worked on that, got through it. The performance went well, and he helped me memorize that like overnight. It was They were pretty impressed with that, and that actually took me to Italy again, working there. That particular opportunity. The other thing that Dan did that was saved me was I had an audition one time for um, an agency in New York, and the agency, and I can say his name because he's passed, unfortunately, was Marcello Giordani,
Mhm.
the opera singer, famous opera singer. Um, he was starting to kind of, I guess, slow down a little bit in his career and started a roster of artists. And a lady that I was working with asked me to audition for him. And the night before, I lost my voice because I got sick. And I
Mhm.
already had this lined up. And so I talked to Dan. He said, "Well, tell you what, can you phonate it all?" And I said, yes, I can phonate it all. So he said, "Do this." He gave me those little brown seeds, the malva nut
Mhm.
seeds.
Uh-huh. The
And he also told me to do the fall that,
the loop. Mhm.
yes, the fall on the train ride up there. He said, "Don't overdo it, but do that a little bit and just kind of do the lulu exercise very lightly and drink this seed, with water." When I got there, my voice was about 50% back.
Mhm.
I don't know how, but that's a what, hour and a half train ride, something like that, to New York from Philly.
Mhm.
And now, of course, I still went in and said, "Guys, I'm completely sick," and
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And, I obviously I only sang one song for them, one aria, but I was asked to come back and do something else when I felt a little better. So it wasn't a bad impression, but if I had not went at all, I wouldn't have had that contact. And later on, I went on to work with that lady who developed her own agency many times after that one meeting. So
Right.
yeah,
Wow.
Dan is
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that he would always, when he the last 4 or 5 years when we were working on mainly exercises and building the voice and the process, he would always use every lesson as a teaching moment. Like if something was going on with me, he'd be like, "Okay, I'm gonna show you this, either Roz's system for this or Wilcox's system or Barbara's system. And there was a time that my voice was just, I had a lot of fluid and the folds just weren't connecting. And he's like, okay, you have 2 hours. And I was like, yeah, I have 2 hours or so. So like usual, we'd like talk for the first hour, at everything and anything. And
Hmm.
then he's like, okay, we need 2 more hours. And he was like, this is what Wilcox would do if a singer had to get through a performance, but their voice was, they were either fatigued or sick. And he's like, Barbara had something similar. And he's like, we're going to do it today so we can get to arias and we can actually sing through some repertoire. I was like, all right. So he was like, so usually, you have your Malva nut tea, and and then you have your lemon water with raw organic honey. And he's like, you have to sip it after every exercise. And he took me through this whole system. And it did
Wow.
have the little ooh. It had ascending and descending exercises alternating. Very specific work. It was like a little cough, he called it. He was like, Roz and Barbara both called it the little cough, where you would pulse diaphragmatically. And then the first step was you would breathe in through cuperto, start the breath, and you'd pulse. Mm. And then you'd release to a hum. And
Mm.
just let it until it runs out. And then the second step, he's like, okay, did it 2 or 3 times. After he made sure I wasn't, manipulating with the little cough, and it was just diaphragmatic opening of the folds. He had me open up to ah, and then he changed the vowel. And dude, I sang through all of my repertoire to that, and it was like
Yeah.
vibrant, and he was like, okay, and of course, like the other part to it was that if you have fatigue, he was like, you have to take an overly dramatic cuperto breath, because what happens with fatigue is
Hmm.
if you have any fluid in the folds are dipping. He's like, so when you take a stronger cuperto breath, you lift them gently, and then you're holding them there with the gentle closure, the stoppage of breath. He's like, so
Hmm.
we've got to do, you have to do that too. We finished. He was like, okay, so now if you were performing, you can't sing for the next 2 or 3 days. You need to just let the voice don't vocal rest for the next 2 or 3 days. Of course, I went and like I was like 25. I like just started singing all my rep the next day, and I just blew out my voice. And I came back 2 days later, and he's like, "Hey, how's it feeling?" I was like, "It's kind of tired." And he's like, "Ah, you sang. I told you not to sing." But yeah, he had a lot of those tricks. Um, I mean, I don't want to call them tricks, but they get you through performances when you really need it.
Right.
But they were all based in even with the tongue and the pillar height, like he taught us. He I remember being like, well, what's the
Hmm.
problem with relaxing the tongue? And he was like, well, the tongue, it extends down the back of the throat. It attaches on the top of the hyoid bone, which attaches to the larynx. It's like, okay. He's like, so if you're releasing the tongue down, if you're not holding the pillars high, the size of the tongue high, um, you have the weight of the tongue sitting on the larynx. And then if you put it down, you're pushing down on the whole larynx and the whole laryngeal structure. He's like, why wouldn't you need freedom of the larynx to move? So yeah, he knew everything there was to be, about the voice. I mean, he
Yeah.
studied under Roz, he said, for 35 years. He studied under Barbara for about 8 years. But he would always go back to Roz and get more information. He said Roz's main influences were John C. Wilcox, who won the Wilcox competition, and Nate Stewart from MGM, who worked with Mario Lanza and built vibrancy in the voice. Not
Hmm.
Rosati. It was Nate who built the vibrancy, and Roz was there for a lot of the lessons when she would work with Nate, and then Mario would come in. So I mean, it's a lost art. There's not many people doing it, if
Yeah.
any, doing it. And definitely, Dan was definitely the last big, maestro of the voice, who really knew that depth, or had that depth of knowledge when it came to the voice. Um,
100%.
but no, tell me about what you're doing now. Tell me about the opera on 75.
Yeah. So Operon 75 is a new company here in McKinney, Texas. And the goal of the company is to give audience members a different experience in the northern Dallas area. So 75 is actually a highway here in the upper Metroplex. And our area will extend from Richardson, Texas, all the way through Plano and uh, Frisco, even though that's not on 75, it's technically the Collin County area, where Dallas Opera is further south in downtown Dallas. And of course, Fort Worth Opera is about an hour away from here. But those are two major opera houses, and there's not really anything on this side of town. Yet this is kind of the home of where and I know you're a Philly guy, but this is kind of the home of the Dallas Cowboys over here in this area. And this is the home of a lot of North Texas, a lot of people here in Frisco, a lot of money over
Hmm.
this way in Plano and McKinney. So we thought about putting together something for this side of town. And the other co-owner is Brianna Clancy. She's a mezzo soprano, actually crossing into soprano rep. Shout out to her. She actually is singing her debut, I think this week and tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, is Suor Angelica in Puccini Suor Angelica. So that's her soprano debut. She is also one of the co-founders here. And then, of course, someone that you and I know from our days in Philadelphia, or at least my days in Philadelphia, a baritone by the name of Daniel Lichtig, who hails from Iowa, but he lives here. He just finished his doctorate program degree from University of North Texas, my old school I went to. And yeah, so he's the other co-founder, and we hope to bring some great opportunities out here. We're excited. Our first fundraiser is on October 17th of this year. And of course, we'll have another performance before that in September. The date's still being decided, but we're super excited.
How can people contact you if they want to learn more? Is it like an email or do you have a website
Sure.
up?
You can go to Opera on 75, no spaces, OPERAON 75 at Facebook on Facebook. That's probably the best way. We are just getting our nonprofit status completed. And so once that happens, we'll have a functioning website that will be operaon75.org. But right now, people can go to Facebook or Instagram and type
Okay,
in Opera on 75, no spaces.
great. Yeah, and what I like about what you're doing with the opera company is, I think people forget that if you want change in the opera world, you want to offer opportunities and make a difference. You really have to go and do it for yourself. You have to create, because I mean,
Yeah.
look at like even the bel canto era of singers like Caruso was singing on the street corners, and doing caricatures. And
Mhm.
like Dan, I remember asking Dan, like, what do you think of Caruso's voice? He's like, oh, my mother heard him in concert, said it was the biggest voice he ever heard. He's like, but there were great
Wow.
singers along, there were other great singers at the time, but he was the most recorded. He saw the
Hmm.
opportunity and he recorded everything. And all the singers of that
Yeah.
time, they all worked very hard to get where they were. Because I remember saying to them not to
Hmm.
put down, singers today, but they're not singing with a true bel canto technique for the majority. And he was like,
Right.
that open throated stuff, pushing the larynx down, all that manipulation, that was around back then. But there was a different caliber of the voice builders and the conductors understood the voice to a certain degree that they only wanted a certain caliber of singers. I mean, look at like
Yeah.
Una furtiva lacrima starts like on the tenor passaggio, on F, and it
Hmm.
starts on U. Like they understood that U is the valve for or at least they collaborated with true voice builders at the time, whether it be Rosati or Vergine, who was Caruso's teacher, and they understood that on that note, the best valve for them to sing is an U. And you see a
Hmm.
lot of like tenor passaggio rep or appoggio rep. It's a lot of O, which is the easiest valve to feel the sensation of appoggio and keep you in there. So I think the only way to make a big difference and bring more awareness and opportunities to singers is to create like you're doing, create an opportunity, create an opera company that gives singers an opportunity from somebody like yourself, because you should be in a position now that you have an educated ear for true singing, true bel
Hmm.
canto singing, and you can actually um, cultivate a new a new perspective around the classical voice training. Because the one thing with Dan is like I heard Dan sing
Absolutely.
musical theater, and it didn't sound like
Hmm.
so many singers had this false understanding of opera, and then because like we talked about before,
Hmm.
like you have those teachers that want you to take the sensation of appoggio and just make it in the whole voice, and it creates this imitation
Yeah.
operatic sound. But the older singers sang, their version of pop, folk music. They sang that kind of music. And like Dan could sing, he sang Phantom, he
Yeah.
sang Les Miserables at the restaurant, and it sounded like better than anybody I've heard sing in the musical theater realm, sing those roles. It was free, it
Yeah.
was easy, it was vibrant. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's definitely gonna. I think it's a great opportunity to, uh, step your foot back in the door on opera. And are you gonna do some singing while you're there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll be doing some singing. I don't think I can get away with not having to do some,
No, I don't think so.
But yeah, it'll be fun. But I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to doing just what you said. Not only cultivating a new audience here, but showing, good things in opera that a lot of people aren't aware of. And for me, it would be fantastic if I could get Dan to do a master class or something like that. And that would be fantastic. Or yourself, that I can make that happen, so people can see. Because people have asked me for years, who do you work with? Who's your teacher? When I moved back here to Dallas, and I was telling you offline that I went to sing for several different coaches, but I was finally pointed to go to Dallas Opera. And I didn't want to do chorus. I'd done my chorus work way before I even moved to Philadelphia. But I said, you know what? I'll go sing for them and see what happens. So I go in to sing with Dallas Opera Chorus. And in that opportunity, I was asked, who are you and where have you been? Type of
Mhm.
situation. And they gave me a solo main stage audition. And they asked me, who do you work with? And I said, well, my voice teacher is Daniel Montes, and he lives in El Paso, but I worked with him in Philadelphia. And of course, they go to searching Daniel Montes. Oh, Daniel Montes. And they think they know, you don't
Yeah.
know who he is.
No. No. No.
But they do now,
Yeah.
because if you sing as he taught you to sing in that method, uh, it turns heads. There's
Oh
just no
yeah.
doubt about it. So,
Yeah, Dan had told me about, he had done an audition here, where it was a recorded competition, and he sent it in recordings. And, I remember, seeing him after he was they communicated with him through email, and, they pulled his all they gave him his money back and said, "You cheated." And he was like, What do you mean I cheated?"
mm,
Like, "You took an old recording from some of these older singers, and you sent it in as your own." They thought he took, like, a Geely recording or
wow,
a Tagliavini recording, and he was unflattered, but, "No,
wow,
that's me. We can, go on the computer now, and I can sing for you." And they wouldn't believe him. They wouldn't believe that somebody could sing like that anymore.
wow.
Um, and it's interesting because, it's not necessarily like he called it, God's cruel joke. To the singer, when you're singing just with squealo leading body, it feels very focused and very small.
Hmm.
Um, but you hear the response from other people do when you can allow that sound to come around. It's just
Yeah,
there's nothing like it, and that's why, like he said, the true bel canto techniques didn't just create a beautiful sound, it also created an individualized sound. Like, everyone has a very individualized sound based on their own unique
right.
physiology. Even if there's a little difference between you and the next person, like all the leggeros, all the líricos, all the dramaticos from the bel canto era, they were still singing the same rep, but they all sounded uniquely different.
Hmm.
And when you listen to them, you're like, "Oh, that's Kozlovsky. Oh,
Right.
that's Lemexev." You know exactly who the difference is because they just had a, that's not manipulation. It's just that's their voice. Whereas today you hear singers and you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know, it
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of the other singers. It's loud, you know. Um,
Hmm.
but
Very
yeah,
true. Very true.
um, but Tommy, it was great to talk to you. Everyone watching the video,
Absolutely.
check out Opera on 75. I am very, very positive it's going to be a very, very big thing. It's going to be, you're going to do great things in the opera world. Open doors for not just yourself, but of course for opera singers, young up and coming opera singers, our age opera singers, because I think there's this push for like it's the same in the dance world, it's the same in a lot of the arts. This push for like younger and younger and younger singers, but they haven't the voice
Sure.
isn't developed, and then they get shorter and shorter careers. So, like, Dan had said, you
Right.
never want to get to a point where, you're young now. He's like, but do you ever want to get to a point where you can't sing, or you're singing with a wobble the size of of the Metropolitan Opera House? He's like, no, you don't. So you build the discipline now, so you don't get to that point. You can always sing, with vibrancy. So
Hmm.
yeah, you're doing great things, man. Very, very, very excited to see where Opera on
I
75
appreciate that.
goes. Follow Tommy on Facebook. Tommy, do you have anything else you want to add? Any other updates?
Well, I just want to congratulate you again. I mean, you did a heck of a job, putting this work together. I know it's a lot of concentration, a lot of very extreme details, even just studying it and learning it, let alone learning it to apply and teach to others and then write about it is just fantastic. So kudos to you with that. I'm glad you're
Thank you.
passing this on.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope it's not too much to also say Tommy has an educated ear on the bel canto methodologies of Garcia, of Melocchi, of Modesti, through Raz and through Dan. So if anybody's interested in learning more about the technique, yes, we do have the online courses. It is geared towards SLPs as well as teachers, because I think in the old world of voice building, the voice teachers did have an understanding of rehabilitation more so than some of the more medical based people at the time. So if you are, looking to go further than the courses, or, you're interested in just maybe one-on-one work, I think, do you do any private work as well, teaching?
Yes, I do from time to time, not as much as I used to, but I still do offer lessons when I have a chance, for sure.
Awesome. Okay, great. Tommy, great talking to you as always. If you are interested, we can of course follow you on Facebook. Hit me with the name again. It's Opera on 75, no spaces, right?
That's correct. Opera on
On Facebook.
75. Yeah.
Fantastic. Follow them, like them,
On
subscribe.
Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram. Okay. I'm excited to see where it goes. As always, thank you for tuning in for this episode of Mystery Bel Canto. If you're interested in learning more, going deeper into the methodologies, we do have our our online courses. You can find those at vocalmastery.podia.com. We will see you next time.